Welcome to the Explainer, folks. Today we're going to be breaking down a massive, and I mean literally game-changing transformation in the sporting world. We are looking at exactly how basketball completely outgrew its own blueprints. Think about it. We've gone from the super rigid, heavily structured systems of the past to this incredibly high-flying, fluid, almost chaotic game that we see today. It's a totally different sport. So, buckle up, because we're about to map out the entire evolution of basketball roles.
Okay, let's just dive right into this provocative question, because it completely upends everything we thought we knew about the game that Dr. James Naismith invented way back in 1891. I mean, for over a century, the rules of basketball anatomy were basically set in stone. If you were 7 feet tall, you stood under the basket. That was your home. And if you were 6 feet tall, you brought the ball up the court. Period. End of discussion. But what happens when that 7-foot giant decides to start crossing people over on the perimeter and threading the needle with no-look passes? Well, it creates absolute chaos for the defense, that's what. It breaks the traditional geometry of the court.
So here is our playbook for today's Explainer. We're going to hit 1. The classic 5 positions, 2. Rise of the hybrids, 3. Specialists and role players, 4. Modern offensive roles, 5. The science of archetypes, and finally 6. The positionless era. Let's get right into it.
Section 1. The classic 5 positions, the original blueprint.
To truly appreciate the massive breakthrough of the modern game, we really have to start with a breakdown of the old guard. For decades, there was honestly only one number that mattered when you were building a basketball roster, and that number was 5. Teams were strictly built around 5 distinct, very rigid roles. You absolutely did not color outside the lines. If you played one of these roles, you stuck strictly to the job description associated with it, and you didn't deviate. It was a formula, and everyone followed it.
In this classic setup, guys stuck to their designated lanes. Let's walk through them. The 1, or the point guard, was your on-court quarterback. They brought the ball up, called the plays, and passed. That's it. The 2, the shooting guard, was your primary outside sniper. Then you had your 3, the small forward, who was kind of the athletic Swiss Army knife of the group. The 4, the power forward, was your bruiser. They rebounded and scored down low in the post. And finally, your 5, the center, was almost always the tallest guy on the floor. His job? Defend the paint, block shots, and absolutely never, ever, under any circumstances, shoot the ball from outside.
Look at the stark contrast here on this slide. It's wild to see it side by side. The traditional center was essentially just a human wall. They stayed right by the rim, grabbed offensive rebounds, and dunked short passes. But the modern versatile big, they are a totally different breed. They're stepping way out to the three-point line. They're super active in the pick and roll, and sometimes they're even initiating the entire offense. It creates absolute mismatch nightmares for opposing coaches because you just can't defend them with a traditional human wall.
Section 2. Rise of the hybrids, disrupting the system.
Now, you know you can't keep supreme athletes boxed into a rigid system forever, right? Soon enough, players started breaking the mold. Enter the tweener. Believe it or not, this actually used to be a massive insult. If you were labeled a tweener, scouts thought you were stuck in basketball no man's land. You were seen as too short to play forward, but way too slow to play guard. But as the game naturally evolved, these players, guys like Charles Barkley back in the day, proved that being in between actually made you a nightmare to guard. They totally flipped the script. Those tweeners became the early prototypes for defensive flexibility and the kind of modern basketball dominance we see today.
Then came the playmaking forwards. The term point forwards started getting tossed around when coaches slowly realized their absolute best passers weren't always their smallest players. Legends like Larry Bird and Scottie Pippen began taking on the playmaking duties of a point guard, but they did it while maintaining the size, strength, and rebounding presence of a typical forward. It was basically a cheat code. It forced opposing defenses to completely rethink everything they knew about matchups.
Section 3. Specialists and role players. Perfecting the niche.
As the game continued to evolve, so did the need for players who could execute highly specific, incredibly tactical functions on the floor. It really wasn't just about throwing your 5 best superstars out there anymore. It was about the complex mechanics of the entire team. And the three-point revolution completely changed the geometry of the court. The concept of stretching the floor became incredibly vital. Think about it. If you have a big man who is a legitimate threat from 25 feet out, the opposing center literally has to leave the safety of the paint to guard him. Suddenly, the lane is wide open for your guards to slash and drive right to the basket. It completely spaced out the entire game.
And this evolution brings us directly to the ultimate role players, those essential glue guys. Elite players like Shane Battier proved that you really don't need to fit perfectly into a traditional positional mold if you can bring an incredibly high basketball IQ and specific game-winning skills to the court. Just look at his quote here. He was a total master of the corner three and an absolute pest on defense. He didn't care about putting up flashy numbers or looking cool. He cared about executing his specific niche and making those grueling defensive stops that actually win championships.
Over time, these highly specialized players became the absolute critical building blocks of championship rosters. You have your sixth man, whose whole job is to inject immediate, high-octane energy and scoring right off the bench. You've got the highly coveted 3-and-D wing, a guy who exists to lock down the opponent's absolute best perimeter player while reliably hitting catch-and-shoot threes on the other end. Then there's the rim protector, swatting and altering everything that comes into the paint, and the rebounding specialist, whose sheer hustle keeps offensive possessions alive. These role players prove to be just as essential to a deep title run as the vaunted starting five.
Section 4. Modern offensive roles, beyond the 1 to 5. So knowing all of this history, what actually happens when we finally just throw out the old 1 through 5 numbers entirely and start categorizing players by what they actually do on the court? Well, the analytics platform B-Ball Index revolutionized how we view the game by doing exactly that. They completely threw out the traditional labels. Instead, they dug into the data and identified these 12 distinct offensive roles based purely on core competencies, play type data, and deep statistical analysis. Instead of just lazily calling someone a shooting guard, they look at the hard data to see if they are a movement shooter who is constantly flying off screens or a stationary shooter just waiting patiently in the corner. It's a totally different way of seeing the floor.
Let's make this concrete. Let's look at the 2015-16 title-winning Cleveland Cavaliers and see how this data builds a much clearer picture of how a modern championship offense actually operates. Under the clunky old system, LeBron James is just listed as a small forward, but under the data, he's a primary shot creator, exactly the same as his point guard, Kyrie Irving. Kevin Love isn't just your standard power forward. The data shows he's a versatile big stretching the floor. Meanwhile, Tristan Thompson focuses strictly on being a roll and cut big. When you look at it this way, it provides a much more accurate map of the team's true offensive engine.
Section 5. The Science of Archetypes, Data-Driven Rosters. Now, if tracking 12 offensive roles sounds a bit complex to you, academic researchers have actually taken this concept even further. A massive scientific study published in the Frontiers Journal utilized advanced statistics to boil the entire global game down to 9 specific, incredibly data-driven archetypes. Notice how this complex radar graph visually maps out the statistical footprints of these 9 scientific archetypes. By analyzing variables like points, rebounds, assists, and shooting percentages per minute across over 22,000 elite players globally, the researchers identified distinct performance clusters. You have groups like floor generals, high-efficiency scorers, aggressive shot blockers, and more. The math literally draws a picture of how players behave on the court, completely devoid of any positional bias.
But here's the really crazy part. They didn't stop at just categorizing players. By deeply analyzing international medal-winning teams and championship lineups, these researchers found an optimal formula for building a 15-player roster. This specific mix of archetypes right here, balancing offensive efficiency, defensive versatility, and elite playmaking, is statistically proven to be the most effective way to assemble a winning basketball team today. They need 4 aggressive scorers, 3 floor generals, 3 high-efficiency scorers, 3 athletic shooters, and 2 aggressive shot blockers. It's literally roster construction boiled down to an exact, repeatable science.
Section 6. The Positionless Era, the Ultimate Breakthrough. All of this evolution we've talked about, from those early tweeners fighting for a spot, to the stretch bigs opening the lane, to the highly specific, data-driven archetypes, it all leads us directly to today. We are living in a time where the rigid lines of the past have completely and totally vanished. Welcome to the positionless era, folks. The modern game is defined by supreme top-to-bottom versatility. We are literally witnessing absolute unicorns on the hardwood right now. You have a center like Nikola Jokic just casually leading the entire league in assists. You have a 7'4" marvel like Victor Wembanyama handling the ball like a seasoned point guard and pulling up for jumpers from 30 feet away. You have Giannis Antetokounmpo grabbing a rebound and taking the ball coast to coast in 3 dribbles. When all 5 guys on the floor can shoot, dribble, and pass at an elite level, the game becomes lightning fast and incredibly unpredictable. So, the crucial point to take away from this explainer today is that modern coaches no longer look at a whiteboard depth chart and ask, "What position do you play?" That's old school thinking. Instead, they look at the athlete standing in front of them and ask, "What can you do?" The label printed next to your name on the roster just doesn't matter anymore.
Your real-time impact, your unique skill set, and your adaptability on the fly are the only things that truly matter.
And as young athletes continue to train entirely without boundaries, working endlessly on their three-point shots and their perimeter ball handling, regardless of how tall they are or how much they weigh, they are actively becoming the ultimate positionless players. It leaves us wondering with a truly fascinating question. Will the classic, strictly defined point guard or the old-school paint-bound center soon be a total relic of the past? It's a wild thing to consider. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, folks, and keep watching the game evolve.